Central to theorist Beatriz Colomina's discourse on the values of interior and exterior domestic space is the notion that houses act as viewing mechanisms that subjectively frame the images of their occupants. Colomina has in mind the neurotic sensibility produced in the subject by modern architecture, but her ideas, when applied to the domestic spaces of 19th century novels, urge new ways of understanding the struggle of female protagonists to assert and maintain their identity. In Wuthering Heights, Cathy's passion and will are so strong and so at odds with every other force in the novel that when Emily Bronte writes her out of the story halfway through, it's almost as if the character's light has burned too brightly and threatened to use up the oxygen. She must go so that others can be seen and heard. Yet Cathy's presence haunts Wuthering Heights in diverse ways. She refuses to be shut out. In examining some of Colomina's key points concerning architectural space, we can begin to see how Cathy is framed in her narrative as a conflicted exhibitionist. In her commentary on Adolph Loos' interiors, Colomina writes that the architect, quote, breaks down the condition of the house as an object by radically convoluting the relation between inside and outside. One of the devices he uses is mirrors, which appear to be openings, and openings which can be mistaken for mirrors. In Wuthering Heights' 12th chapter, Cathy confronts her image in a mirror and is chided by Nelly for being frightened at what she sees. It is communicated to the reader that Cathy has mistaken her own face for someone else's, although she remains fixated on the reflected image that scared her. I risk sounding silly in my suggestion that Wuthering Heights contains a key feature of the science fiction novel, time travel, in the exportation of holographic images, but by probing the 3rd and 12th chapters, I will show how Emily Bronte anticipated the voyeuristic aspect of modernity, specifically voyeurism with the female as subject, and wrote Cathy in such a way that the character actually gains from what might seem to be an exploitative use of intimate space. One such intimate space is Cathy's childhood bed. Although it proves to be a place of terror for Lockwood, Cathy's bed at Wuthering Heights is initially thought of by the narrator as a haven. The reason for Lockwood's sheltered feeling is the womb-like aspect of the large oak case that encloses and protects him. In Lockwood's words, it formed a little closet. I slid back the paneled walls, got in with my light, and pulled them together again. The strange bedchamber in Cathy's old room acts as a theater box, which Colomina calls a device which both provides protection and draws attention to itself. It is also a platform for Lockwood's dreams, where he can, since he's provided with a window, apprehend vividly the former occupant of the house when she tries later to get in. The theater boxes of the home are, in Colomina's view, sites intended both to provide access to and enclosure of the feminine. She says, at the intersection of the visible and the invisible, women are placed as guardians of the unspeakable. Why wouldn't Cathy want to return to this safe place where she inscribed her name in all its iterations, wrote in her diary, and, it's implied, spent time with Heathcliff? Yet she cannot return because she is dislocated in space and time. It's the waif, Cathy, lost on the moor, who appears to Lockwood and fights so tenaciously to get back inside once he breaks the window to stop the tapping of the branch. Lockwood fools himself he's the author of his own dreams, though. Quote, reading the inscription Catherine Linton often overproduced an impression which personified itself when I no longer had my imagination under control. According to Colomina, quote, we find the subject occupying the theatrical space, undermining its boundaries. The subject is split between actor and spectator of its own play. The completeness of the subject dissolves, as also does the wall that he is occupying. Cathy has, at the outset of the novel, been working at dissolving the wall between her and Heathcliff for 20 years. The fact that Lockwood is in her bedchamber does not necessarily provoke the spectacle, but it does provoke his research into who Catherine Earnshaw Linton was, and eventually, we understand as readers, the encounter between him and the specter provokes the story of Wuthering Heights. So, it's an important barrier to be broken, this window framed inside this bed, framed inside this house. If Cathy is going to break through the wall that keeps her trapped as Edgar's wife and open the possibility of reunion with Heathcliff, she must do it before she dies, and, important, she must do it as the girl again, half savage and hardy. She can't re-enter the domestic space of her childhood, the room at Wuthering Heights, as Mrs. Linton. Colomina emphasizes the importance of the house as, quote, a mechanism for classification. It collects views and in doing so classifies them. The house is a system for taking pictures. What determines the nature of the picture is the window. If the window is a lens, the house itself is a camera pointed at nature. So, what implications does this have for the mature Cathy, the pregnant Cathy who is delirious in her bedroom at Thrushcross Grange? How does she project herself into the environment of the Heights? How does she impinge Lockwood's consciousness as he dreams in her old bed? Because Cathy cannot physically inhabit the upper floors of Wuthering Heights from her room in Thrushcross Grange, she must somehow transcend the geographical space between the two properties, which seems vast in this novel featuring small, tight spaces, by means of the hidden mechanisms by which space is constructed as interior. The theater box with a window is, once Lockwood beds down for the night, ready to receive the spectacle Cathy has projected 20 years earlier. Nelly's with Cathy in her room, watching her the way Edgar has asked her to, and Cathy has occasion to stare at her reflection in a mirror, hanging against the opposite wall. It is this mirror that, like a camera lens aligned with the window, affords Cathy the chance to picture her old room and communicate beyond the confinement imposed on her by those at Thrushcross Grange. The mirror holds her attention for a while until she lapses into a dreamy state. Then this astonishing utterance. "I see in you, Nelly, an aged woman. You have gray hair and bent shoulders. This bed is the fairy cave under Penistone Crag, and you are gathering elf bolts to hurt our heifers, pretending while I'm near that they're only locks of wool. That's what you'll come to 50 years hence. I know you're not so now. I'm not wandering. You're mistaken, or else I should believe you really were that withered hag, and I should think I was under Penistone Crag, and I'm conscious it's night, and there are 2 candles on the table, making the black press shine like jet." This is the language of denial. Cathy is in an altered state of consciousness, and so is apprehending time and space in remarkable ways. Yet she qualifies her words with conditional phrases that undercut the force of what's happening. She's looking into a mirror and seeing not her present self, but past and future. And beyond this, past and future taking place in different spaces than the Thrushcross Grange bedroom. Colomina discusses the employment of lens as mirror in her exploration of windows and mirrors as portals for the interior consciousness to project itself onto. Quote, "The manipulation of 2 realities produces something that is already outside the logic of realism. Rather than represent reality, it produces a new reality. That which is transparent, like the glass in our window, also reflects the interior and superimposes it onto our vision of the exterior. The glass functions as a mirror when the camera obscura is lit." Is it too far-fetched to conjecture that Cathy is, as she continues to talk to Nelly in this scene, literally seeing her old room and her own self at Wuthering Heights? To Cathy's contention that she sees a face in the black press, Nelly replies, "There is no press in the room and never was. But there is, according to Lockwood, a press in Cathy's old room. Quote, "The whole furniture consisted of a chair, a clothes press, and a large oak case, with squares cut out near the top, resembling coach windows. Figures 1 and 2 on the board demonstrate one way the rooms might be configured and that mirrors and windows might be aligned, so that Cathy's enclosed bed at Wuthering Heights and her 4-poster bed at Thrushcross Grange would afford the same view of the press/mirror. Nelly says that not a light gleamed from any house, far or near, and those at Wuthering Heights were never visible. Yet Cathy cries out, "Look, that's my room with a candle in it, and the tree swaying before it, and the other candle in Joseph's garret." Nelly dismisses this as a hallucination brought on by Cathy's illness, but the spectator's progression from projecting herself through the mirror to proving her image's reception by going to the window is significant. There's no reason for a candle to burn in Cathy's window unless she is, in this new spatial reality, penetrating Lockwood's dream, as he occupies the theater box of her old room. As Colomina describes, theater is always about presence. Both the actor and the spectator are fixed in a continuous space and time, those of the performance. The most intriguing explanation for the adult Cathy's terror is that she sees Lockwood's image in the black press. Her efforts at transcendental visualization are, in this view, too successful, too accurate a leap across the temporal and spatial boundaries that frustrate her in life. In her delirium and death, Cathy is able to fuse her own consciousness to that of Lockwood, prompting the terrified guest to call for help. After Heathcliff is alerted to Cathy's dramatic re-entrance into the narrative, he begins to recede in influence and diminish even in his capacity for cruelty, dying within 6 months of Lockwood's encounter with the waif Catherine Linton. Once Heathcliff enters that phantom space and unites with his lover, the story is both over and begun anew in Lockwood's remarkable narrative, and Catherine has achieved the purpose of her expansive vision. The penetration of space by the image and the way such space is framed is an important issue for 19th century authors, and for female protagonists the stakes are particularly high. Often the very shape their identity takes depends upon how they are viewed and by what means they manipulate the domestic stage that serves as a correlative for their interior selves.